For those of you who tuned in yesterday, the decks are going to be no surprise. VespiquenFlareon, which has been Jimmy O'Brien's fairy tale deck of the season apparently, and then obviously ToadBats with Seismitoad for Pramawat.
Absolutely. Both of these players kind of playing the deck that they're known for, especially Jimmy. You know, the streak, all the wins we talked about earlier have come from VespiquenFlareon. So we're going to see two experienced players who understand the matchup for sure.
And the thing is, like, both of these guys have won regionals this season with these decks. So these are, I mean, tournament-proven worthy decks. Landorus, or I'm sorry, I keep saying Landorus, but I meant Seismitoad with Crobat is a big one. This is a deck that that Pram's been playing for weeks now, and he started playing it at regionals. He wasn't too sure about it week 1 of regionals, and then all of a sudden he started winning, and he got the big Pram ego going, and all of a sudden he's like, this is the best deck in the format, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then VespiquenFlareon came out of nowhere week 2. And it just obviously dominated, and it inspired so many people to play it this weekend. It was all over the top tables, and 5 VespiquenFlareon decks actually ended up making the top 32 cut. But actually, the only deck that did better than it happened to be Seismitoad variants, and I guess that's a little unfair since Seismitoad can go with so many other Pokemon. But there's still 12 different Seismitoad decks that made the top 32 cut,
including 7 copies of Seismitoad Giratina, which I think going into this tournament a lot of players felt was a little overhyped. It did win the Arena Cup in Germany earlier this year, and those European tournaments kind of always set the stage for what's going to happen in the U.S. and elsewhere, and I think that a lot of people, you know, were at first really excited about the deck, and then I've seen a decline in just kind of players' thoughts about it, but 7 copies have made it in the top 32. It meant that enough players thought it was good to play it here, thought it was well positioned, so we'll see.
Yeah, I think we're getting ready for the match. I think we're going to cut to the match right now. But you're absolutely right about the Seismitoad Giratina being one of those decks that for a little while was overhyped, and now it feels like it's underrated.
Right.
Because people are just going like, oh, you know what? It's not really the real deal anymore. It hasn't done well at all at regionals. And then lo and behold, it's got 7 people in the top 32 cut, which I mean, it's got to be a favor to bring at least a couple of people into the top 8.
Absolutely. And, you know, you might be hearing that 7 number thinking it's kind of low, but 7 of 32 players are playing the Seismitoad Giratina deck. And, like you said, 12 players are playing Seismitoad variants in general.
And the handshake did happen. Michael Pramawat and Jimmy O'Brien starting it off. Pram at the left and Jimmy on the right. Jimmy starts with an EV start with a Combi and an unknown. So he clearly looks like he went second here, and he just wanted to bring his hand down to stop himself from really getting hurt by N too badly. And there is an N itself. Pramawat just drops a double color synergy and immediately ends his opponent and himself back to 6 hard hands.
Yeah, so they're going to both go to 6 cards. And you see, as you said, Jimmy did start with that EV because he knows he's playing VespiquenFlareon. He's going to have to take a turn to evolve. He knows the Seismitoad can do some real damage in the beginning of the game, and he wants to protect that VespiquenFlareon at all costs. Flareon and VespiquenFlareon, which are both the Pokemon that these Pokemon in Jimmy's field are going to evolve to, both do similar things, you know, the revenge attacks. However, as you can see, Seismitoad is weak to grass, which is huge.
And Flareon's weak to water. Remember, we can't definitely forget that. A Seismitoad with a Muscle Band will knock out a Flareon. So that's also really important to note. But the VespiquenFlareon, being the grass Pokemon that it is, makes it very easy for it to knock out Seismitoad even past the Quaking Punch lock. And remember, from here on out, Jimmy's got to be aware of that Quaking Punch, which is going to happen, given the double color synergy that's already been attached to Pram's Seismitoad.
Yeah, Quaking Punch has just been the story of the past few standard formats. This expanded format now, just absolutely an incredibly powerful attack, and you're going to see Jimmy O'Brien playing a lot of items this turn. I'm not sure the contents of his hand, but he's definitely going to try and play all the items he can. As you said, he knows that Pram has that double color list on the Seismitoad ready to go, and he needs to thin his deck out. He needs to not draw items. He needs to use all the items he can, and he needs to be prepared to play a game in which he can play no more items, maybe throughout the entire game.
Yeah, so that just basically means that he's got to play as many items as he can on this given turn. That Battle Compressor is the perfect item for him to play on turn 1. He needs to get a certain amount of Pokemon into his discard pile so that Revenge and Be-Revenge and all that good stuff do as much damage as they need to in order for the Seismitoad to get knocked out. Pramawat is really fearing these knockouts from the VespiquenFlareon early on. That's how Pramawat loses the game. However, he wins the game when VespiquenFlareon kind of stutters at the beginning of the game.
Yeah, and I think Battle Compressor is really the key. We saw Jimmy play against the Seismitoad deck yesterday, and although he did end up winning that match, there were some rough times, especially when he didn't get Battle Compressors. Those early Battle Compressors to not only, you know, thin your deck, It's an item you can play early, but also put the Pokemon in the discard pile, which is exactly where he wants them to be. So being able to play 2 Battle Compressors on the first turn is going to be absolutely huge for Jimmy, and he follows it up with a Versus Seeker for that Juniper.
That's right. So Juniper does draw him 7 additional cards, but that is his supporter for the turn. Now Pram's going to look through the discard pile, see how many Pokemon are in the discard pile. I think it's something along the lines of like 2 or 3. Um, the Battle Compressor actually ended up getting a couple of non-Pokemon cards, I believe.
Yeah,
Remember, he always has an unknown in the bench.
That's one of the beautiful things about the Battle Compressor. You know, we've been talking about it a lot in the context of the Vespiquen deck, which says, you know, you're going to put a bunch of Pokemon in there and boost your Be Revenge attack. However, you can also put, as you saw Jimmy do, didn't have a supporter in his hand, he Battle Compressors away a Juniper, plays the Versus Seeker in his hand, gets a Juniper back, and all of a sudden it's a supporter.
And I hate to be the bearer of bad news for Pramawat fans, but it seems like all he could do right now is play an immediate end. So the only 2 cards that he's played outside of the Double Colorless and the Seismitoad, and I guess the Stadium are just ends. That's basically how his turn began. Now he has to hope to draw something beyond what he's got here because he runs, you know, he's definitely in danger of getting knocked out here from a Vespiquen and like maybe a Timely Juniper or something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. That's as we said before, the Vespiquen can take advantage of that Seismitoad grass weakness and really do some early damage. It looks like Pram's going to be able to survive, though. Looks like he's got that Zubaz. He has a computer search in his hand, so he's got some things going on.
And all Pram does here is Quaking Punch. He decides not to use his computer search too early. He still has no idea exactly how strong of a start Jimmy has. And Jimmy does immediately evolve to 2 Flareons. Remember, Flareon not at its strongest against Seismitoad. However, he still has plenty of cards to work with. However, he just passes Flareon evolution, and then an immediate pass. He just wanted to bring the Flareon down in order for it to, well, currently it can still survive a Quaking Punch, but more importantly than that, he'll still be able to get 2 Pokemon into the discard pile once the Flareon does get knocked out.
Absolutely. You can see, I know Jimmy has a Shaymin EX in his hand. Can't use it because of that Silent Lamp. He also has the Unknown with the Farewell Letter ability. And besides that, I think he just has a bunch of item cards in his hand. This has kind of been the story of the weekend with Seismitoad EX. Just, you know, your opponent has a bunch of cards they can't use in their hand. It's not very easy for them to win the game.
That's right. Remember that the Unknown cannot be used currently. So we have to keep that in mind. We can't just assume that he can Unknown past the Silent Lab or anything like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Silent Lab, super powerful card in decks like these. You know, Pram has no basic Pokemon that are really going to use abilities, and he can definitely sequence his plays in ways where he can take advantage of his own abilities and stop Jimmy from using his.
Golbat does come down and brings 20 damage onto the benched Combee. That can prove to be extremely strong if Jimmy doesn't find a Vespiquen immediately, because then any type of Crobat evolution or another Golbat that can come down would mean the end of that specific Combee. Another Seismitoad does come down with a double colorless energy, and besides that, Pram's hand seems to be it for Pram's hand. He's thinking about playing the Hypnotoxic Laser. I think you do here, and he does. You just want to get that quick knockout of the Flareon. You don't want to give the Vespiquen too many turns to set up past your Quaking Punch lock.
Yeah, and we are going to see the Quaking Punch for the knockout after factoring in resistance. Just 1 prize for Pram, which is kind of the name of the game. You know, one of the reasons that this Vespiquen deck is so powerful is because every knockout that your opponent's going to be taking is only going to be for 1 prize, whereas when you're getting a knockout, you're taking 2 prizes. So that's, you know, that math works out really well, and hopefully you can take advantage of that. That's what Jimmy's going to aim to do throughout the tournament.
One thing to note is that Jimmy had the opportunity to use Farewell Letter on his Unknown early on, but maybe it's the fact that it's so early in the morning and we haven't gotten too much sleep, but he just honestly neglected to do so before ending his turn, and then Pramawat immediately punished him with that Silent Lab.
We saw Pram drop the Crobat, put 3 damage counters on that Vespiquen, take a prize, and force Jimmy to promote something else that's likely going to get knocked out this term. So Pram definitely in the driver's seat.
Yeah, he really is. It seemed like Jimmy had a great start, but it just didn't deliver anything else past the first few cards. And that Silent Lab has just been destroying Jimmy, because I believe he has a Shaymin in hand that he's had for a while now, and he hasn't been able to play it just because Silent Lab is honestly just the perfect counter to that card, especially when Jimmy doesn't play any counter stadiums, I don't believe.
Nope, not a 1.
Yeah, so that Silent Lab is there to stay. Pramawat does not have any counter stadiums for the Silent Lab, and neither does Jimmy, so no more abilities from basic Pokemon from here on out.
And we do see that Pramawat attaches the Muscle Band to that Seismitoad, going to allow him to get the knockout if he can find a Hypnotoxic Laser on this Unknown, which isn't too important, but keeping the pressure on is, you know, he just definitely wants to take prizes and kind of mitigate the advantage that Jimmy has as far as taking 2 prizes versus Pramawat's 1, as we were saying before.
Exactly. Now remember, Jimmy does still have some time to work with here. Seismitoad is not particularly known for its aggression. It doesn't deal too much damage right away, but also because it's Zubat and Crobat, or I'm sorry, Golbat and Crobat, the unknown can definitely survive this Quaking Punch, but it would still go down to a Golbat coming down on Pram's following turn. However, it didn't end up mattering because Pram did find the Hypnotoxic Laser, and down went that unknown.
Yeah, now Pram's in a really solid position. He's up 3 prizes. Looks like Jimmy's struggling to put together anything. There's the Vespiquen from Jimmy, but without a double colorless energy, it's not going to matter too much. The advantage that Jimmy's had here is that it has been able to keep 2 Combees on the bench, so if anything were to happen to one, he has another to evolve in the Vespiquen, but I think it might just be too little too late at this point. Pram could easily run off with this game, and that's one game out of the match. He'd advance to 9 wins. It's a pretty big game, but
Yeah, this is also a big game for Pram. He's also 2 wins away from making the top 8. So just like Jimmy, all he really needs to do is just secure 2 wins. If either of these players can get this win, then that just means that they're 1 win away with 4 rounds to go. So they're all but secure to make a top 8 run after having won a regionals earlier this season. Now, at the same time, remember, Jimmy's streak is on the line. This is a big thing. It's so rare to have such a good record throughout a season, and let alone in a couple of weekend stretch. So this is actually really important for this player, for Jimmy. I'm sure that he would love to keep the undefeated streak going, not just for points' sake, but just for history's sake.
Oh, absolutely. This has got to be one of the, if not the most impressive regional streak. Winning a regional undefeated, moving into day 2 undefeated. I mean, Jimmy's got to feel happy, but with that comes the need to just want to increase the streak. I can't imagine it would be the most dominant regional performance ever. I'm sure if he were able to win 2 regionals, much less undefeated, would just be amazing.
It's right up there with Israel Sosa's three regionals wins in one season. It's right up there with that. So I mean, we're talking about history that could be definitely in the making here. But Jimmy does have to find a way to win this round. Let alone this game. This game is just looking awful for Jimmy. Pram is still in the driver's seat. It seems like even when Pram doesn't have any supporters, he seems to top deck one right on his following turn. So Pram, once again, all firing on all cylinders, and down comes a Golbat. The Golbat is going to strike onto the Combi, actually, instead of the Eevee. And now an Ultra Ball is probably going to find him another Golbat in order for that Eevee to go down, I would assume. Or no, actually, the Combi would go down to that.
Yeah, he can sneaky bite the Combi, knock out the Eevee with the attack, and go down to 1 single prize.
Exactly.
And there it is, a sneaky bite, placing 2 damage counters onto that Combi for the knockout.
And now a super scoop up there would be big, but no, he did not land that super scoop up. Had he landed that super scoop up, the Eevee would also be going down through a sneaky bite. But it was not meant to be, and down goes Eevee with a Quaking Punch. And Pram does go down to a single prize. Vespiquen in the active position, a Flareon which gets knocked out immediately from a Quaking Punch on the bench. Jimmy's time is running desperately out.
Yeah, I think it might just be too little too late, Jimmy has 6 prize cards remaining to Pram's 1, attaching the basic fire energy there, and playing in the end. So
Jimmy now ends his opponent to 1. If there's any chance of him winning this game, it's going to be through this. An end to 1 brings Pramawat down to a single card in hand, but with a Seismitoad with no damage on the active position, a Seismitoad with a double colorless on the bench, and then even a Seismitoad on the bench with a single water energy. Pramawat's pretty much as prepared as you can be, even past this end to 1.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, that's the way, it's pretty unlikely that Jimmy wins this game at this point, but if he does, this is how it's done. And Pram low, put him to a low amount of cards, and hope to be able to take the game. Looks like he's just going to intelligence gathering for 20, draw back up to 6.
Jimmy actually plays that shaman in order to avoid maybe escape rope shenanigans. I like that play. Jimmy's still playing at pretty much at peak level, even in this awful position.
Absolutely. We saw that Pramawat drew the Juniper off the end of 1. Just got to be so frustrating for Jimmy. You end your opponent to 1 hoping they don't draw anything. Look how many cards are left in his deck, but he just draws the best card casually.
Man, it is Pramawat, all right? These are things that you just have to assume are going to happen when you're playing against Pram. And now I believe it goes 2 Ultra Balls in a row. The first one found a Crobat. I believe the second one's going to find a Crobat as well. That's going to be 60 damage placed onto the Vespiquen just through Crobat alone, which means that Seismitoad's attack is going to be more than enough to knock out this Vespiquen. And down goes Jimmy for game one. Jimmy is one game away from seeing his first defeat in 2 weekends.
Yeah, absolutely. We saw that game was just absolutely brutal and really showcased the power of Seismitoad EX. We had, like you said, Jimmy had a perfectly reasonable start. He got some Combees on the bench, started with some EVs, Battle Compressored away some stuff. Was really, he had a first turn Juniper, was really getting somewhere. But as soon as that Quaking Punch hit, we saw what happened. Jimmy just had no resources, couldn't play any of the items in his hand, couldn't find that double color energy to attack, and just it's so hard to fight through a Quaking Punch, and we really saw how dominant that can be.
Yeah, this is a matchup that actually proved. I hope that we would see fireworks in it. I really did. Like when I saw round 10 Jimmy O'Brien against Michael Pramawat Table 1, I was just like, oh man, this has all the makings to be a classic match. But game 1 has just been utter dominance. I'm hoping that game 2 is definitely a different story. I want to see a very competitive match here. Both of these players are obviously some of the two of the best players in the world right now, and they seem to know Expanded better than almost anybody.
Yeah, and I think we will. This match, Pram 6-0 Jimmy, this isn't really indicative of the matchup, I think. Seismitoad very powerful, but like we said, Vespiquen can play off of that weakness, and I think that the matchup is closer than that game would show, and that's why we're playing best of 3 Swiss here. We're giving every player a chance. We know that bad draws happen. We know that, sometimes just luck isn't on your side. So the best of 3 Swiss helps to mitigate that. And yeah, I'm hoping we see a really close match. Regardless of the way it goes, I know that Jimmy would love to keep the streak alive. I know that Pram's itching to be the one to end the streak. So we'll have to see how it goes.
That's right. And you know what? Speaking of people who really know the expanded format, you have to kind of feel like there's an upper echelon of players who truly got to understand the format. People like Jimmy O'Brien and Frank Diaz, Michael Pramawat. These guys have seen repeated success throughout these 3 weekends. And then there's people like JP, for example, who not only top-8'd or actually became a finalist in Week 1's Arizona Regionals, but he actually ended up winning Vancouver Regionals last night.
Yeah, Jonathan Perenata, a Seattle player, ended up, like Josue said, second at Arizona, losing to Israel Sosa in the finals, and then came back for last night's Vancouver British Columbia Regional Championship and ended up taking first place. So we've seen a lot of this kind of dominance at the top tables. Now we're looking at Jonathan Perenata has a first and a second. Jimmy O'Brien has a first, undefeated, moving in, maybe going to make the top 8 here, very likely. We have Frank Diaz, Michael Pramawat, all these players who are just really showcasing how good they are at the format.
Exactly. And now there's the handshake. Game 2 is about to begin. Now Jimmy O'Brien is going to be the very first player to draw a card here in this game 2. 2 Combees start for Jimmy and a Dedenne start for Pram.
Yeah, definitely not what Pram wants to see. The Dedenne start, not really very useful versus this deck. It's Dedenne is a lightning type Pokemon in there to kind of take advantage of Evil Tall EX, weakness to lightning and things like that. So not the ideal start, but with cards like Super Scoop Up and kind of all the consistent item cards that Pram is running, it's very possible that it doesn't cause him too much trouble.
Yeah, and a big Battle Compressor once again for Jimmy on turn 1, as well as an unknown start. These are big cards for Jimmy to draw early on. Remember, we need to see these cards come out of Jimmy on turn 1 because he's not guaranteed to be able to play them at any other point in the game. And right away we see, I believe, 3 Pokemon hit the discard pile for Jimmy.
Yeah, I think there was a Battle Compressor for an Audino and 2 unknowns. Couldn't quite see the first card because of the glare, but...
And now an Ultra Ball is going to discard a Jirachi, I believe, as well as another item. And it's going to find Jimmy a Shaman. So he's getting rid of all of these ability Pokemon now while he still can, in order to be able to avoid getting Silent Labbed out of the game again.
Yeah, when Pram plays that Silent Lab, it is going to go unopposed. One of the things about Stadium cards is that your opponent can play one and knock yours out, but Jimmy is playing no Stadiums here, so once that Silent Lab hits, it will stick for the rest of the game.
Exactly, and we saw that actually ended up being one of the determining factors in Game 1, and that's why Jimmy couldn't really come back, because he was relying on the Shaman, which he could never actually play. So now Jimmy understands the deck and the matchup a little bit better coming into Game 2, and he Ultra Balls for another unknown in order to be able to use it right now, rather than just kind of have it sit dead in his hand and in play later on.
Absolutely. Not only is he going to be able to activate that Farewell Letter and draw a card, but it's also going to put a basic Pokemon, or put a Pokemon in general, in Jimmy's discard pile, fuel that B Revenge attack, and this is certainly a good start from Jimmy. We've seen him have a good start like this before, and then ultimately that Quaking Punch proves too strong, but if Jimmy's going to win this match, this is how it's going to be done. You know, a lot of items, a lot of cards being drawn in the first turn, getting the double combi starts, absolutely amazing.
That start from Jimmy is insane. Now he Ultra Balled again, this time finding another Shaman. That's a second Shaman activation of the game, and now a second Battle Compressor activation of the game. This is Jimmy O'Brien's deck firing on all cylinders, and as long as he doesn't forget to discard the Unknown here for another card, he's going to have drawn so many cards throughout this turn one.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is really what you want to see. Like we said before, I personally think the Battle Compressor is one of the best cards in the format and really in this matchup, really important to fire off on one of the first few turns. I'm really interested to see what Pram has in his hand and how his turn goes, because one thing we've seen throughout this tournament with the VespiquenFlareon decks is that reliance on double colorless energy.
And another computer search now.
Oh, wow.
This is Jimmy once again getting all of his cards that he needs. Gets another combi. That's 3 combis in play as well as 2 Shamans and an Unknown. And now I don't even think he's played a supporter yet. And no, he is not. He's drawing another 7 cards. This time with Juniper. This has been like the 30th cards that he's seen this turn.
And I'd love for Jimmy here to hit a double close energy. Like I was saying, that's kind of been the bottleneck of his deck. I feel like when you can't play those items, when you're not drawing a whole lot of cards for the turn, it can be really difficult to hit those very few energy you run. There's the Farewell Letter activation. Draws Jimmy a Silver Bangle. Certainly a card he's going to want to play as soon as possible. And does Pram run any energy removal? Is there any enhanced hammers in the list?
I don't believe so, but let's take a look real quick. Yes, there is actually. There's 2 enhanced hammers in Pram's list.
Okay, that's what I thought. Yeah, so that's definitely a factor too. VespiquenFlareon's attack does take 2 energy, so usually that's formed with just a double colorless. But because it is special energy, Pram can remove them with the enhanced hammer.
And Jimmy's turn finally ends here. It seems there might be a little bit of confusion as to whether or not it's ended. But no, there it is. Pram draws his card for the turn. He actually draws the enhanced hammer we were just talking about. But Pram finally gets to see any type of cards. And there it is. There's a quick Juniper for 6 cards. Pram has to discard away so many supporters and potentially good items here. And, like, for example, the enhanced hammer we were just talking about. But he needed to see a new card, new hand of 7, because that Dene start with nothing else just was not going to cut it.
Yeah, and we did see, we've been talking about Silent Lab so much, and you see the Pramawat ends up discarding it off of the Juniper, and that's just because, he is running Pokemon with abilities. He does have Shaman EX of his own, and he can't risk playing that Silent Lab and then Junipering and having a Shaman that can draw more cards and not being able to do so. He's in a rough spot. He knows that the ball is definitely in Jimmy's court. Jimmy is getting pretty well set up, and he knows that he might need a Shaman this turn. He needs to do all that he can to have just as good of a setup as Jimmy.
Exactly. Now, Pramawat at this point is going to find himself a Seismitoad. He does still need to get some sort of offense going. That Dedenne start is obviously not ideal, but he needs to find a way around this. Ideally, it'd be a Super Scoop Up right now, or, yeah, I mean, it has to be a Super Scoop because he's already used the supporter for the turn.
Yeah, absolutely, and we're going to see.
I believe he does have the Super Scoop Up in hand, but no, actually, it's just a Shaman, a lowly Shaman for 5 cards.
Not the perfect Shaman, but, 5 cards will do.
Okay, we do see a Super Scoop Up in Pram's hand now, so he can definitely go for it. I don't know if he has a double colorless yet or not, but either way, there's a Super Scoop Up. Heads on the Super Scoop Up. He actually has to pick up the Shaman because I don't believe he had the double colorless in hand.
Yeah, so what Pram's really looking for here is a way to get that Dedenne out of the active position, a way to promote that Seismitoad, and then the double colorless, like you said, to attack with. So,
whoa, Pram actually discards a Super Scoop Up from his hand here off an Ultra Ball. So that actually tells me a little bit about what Pram's strategy is, and that's that he's not that interested in getting his Dedenne out of the active position. That's a little interesting to me because, I don't know, I would assume that the other 2 cards in his hand are just, I mean, obviously one is a Shaman, but I guess the other card in his hand is just too important for him.
The thing is, too, is the decision he has to make is, with Jimmy having this kind of start, it's very possible that Pram, even if he gets the Quaking Punch, he says, hey, Quaking Punch, 30 damage, and Jimmy just goes, okay, I'll evolve the VespiquenFlareon, and I'll attach a double colorless and knock you out. Because like we said before, that grass weakness on Seismitoad is a very big deal in this matchup.
A laser from Pramawat does put the Combi to sleep. That's 10 damage per turn onto the Combi because of poison, plus the sleep that it now has to wake up from. Is that going to be the end of Pram's turn? No energy still. And that is the end of Pram's turn. Now Jimmy has to flip to see if he wakes up. He does not. So now the Combi has to evolve to VespiquenFlareon in order for it to start its in order for Jimmy to have any type of offense.
And we do see the double colorless and the VespiquenFlareon in Jimmy's hand. Unsure of how many Pokemon are in the discard pile, but definitely having the double colorless and the Vespiquen is going to put Jimmy in a pretty good place here. Looks like he has some item cards too that he actually gets to use past turn 1.
Yeah, so like for example, the Vespiquen will be able to knock out the Seismitoad for sure. It's just a matter of whether he's got enough prize or Pokemon in the discard pile for maybe like a Crobat knockout as well from a Vespiquen.
Yeah, and then we see Jimmy just played the Hex Maniac, so no abilities for Pram this turn. He's going to have no sneaky bites, no setups, nothing like that. And that's really where Hex Maniac can shine, is just in these turns where Jimmy's going, all right, I'm going to knock you out. I'm going to gain an advantage. Also, you can't play abilities next turn, so have fun getting set up.
Another laser from Pramawat also puts the Vespiquen to sleep. Now this one can prove to be very important. At this point, the Vespiquen has to wake up. I do not believe that Jimmy has any ways around sleep besides that. I don't think I see any type of like switching effect for Jimmy.
He does have an Audino in his deck.
But he already discarded.
But he discarded on turn 1 with the Battle Compressor.
Yeah. So we do see a double colors for Seismitoad. Finally, we're going to see an attack from Pram. It seems like it's been forever, but it's actually only turn 3.
Yeah, there's the double colors finally off that computer search. Muscle band attached, and you're right. This laser flips, the sleep flip rather, is going to be pretty big. When Pramawat got the heads on the first laser to put the Combi to sleep, not really a big deal. If Combi evolves, it wakes up, but this one can definitely be big.
Yeah. Pramawat does use his Versus Seeker in order to draw 7 more cards with the Juniper. And now that, okay, there is a Silent Lab. That's exactly what Pram needed to see here. He wanted to avoid any type of like potential abilities that could ruin his day. He wanted to lock that in as soon as possible. And now it's up to the Sleep Flip in order for Jimmy to really start dominating this game. The Sleep Flip is huge, and Jimmy catches it midair. Sleep Flip, he does not wake up. That is huge for Pramawat here. That means that Jimmy is not going to be able to attack this following turn, and the Double Colorless and the Vespiquen are both going to go down.
Absolutely, and this is something where, we can see what happened last game happen again, where Jimmy he doesn't have Vespiquens. He doesn't have the double colorless. Now Pram's going to deal with his only threat on the board, and now Jimmy has to find those cards. He has to find the Vespiquens. He has to find the double colorless. He has to find something to do. And wow, that sneaky bite. Going to take out that Vespiquen, and now Jimmy's forced to promote something and let it get hit by that Seismitoad. What a turn. Pram really used his second turn to turn this game around.
This is a huge turn of events for Pramawat here. The fact that the Vespiquen did not wake up really put Jimmy in a tough spot, followed by the Golbat activation. Does knock out the Vespiquen, forces the Eevee to come into the active position, and now another laser puts that Eevee to sleep, and more importantly is going to knock out that Eevee. Now a Combi takes 20 additional damage from another sneaky bite here.
Yeah, and that Combi's in range of getting sneaky bit for the knockout, and there's still a lot of game to be played. Both players sitting with 5 prize cards left, gonna draw 5 off this end, but definitely Pram is advantaged here. And we could see the streak be ended, Krim.
Yeah, no kidding. It seemed like Jimmy was gonna win this game too with ease, but some timely Pram luck trademark is really bringing Pram right back into this game.
And it just goes to show you, sometimes the first few turns can be sort of strange. We saw Jimmy get a pretty good setup. Pram struggled in the first couple turns, but then it came back. There's a lot of skill in Pokemon. There's a lot of things that can change as the turns go on.
And now Vespiquen does become active for Jimmy. Another Eevee comes down, but remember, he still needs a double colorless energy.
I do see it in his hand.
There is a double colorless, so this is going to mean that this Seismitoad is going to go down, and Jimmy is going to go down to 3 prizes as opposed to Pram's 4, but this is not before Jimmy plays an N in order to draw himself 5 additional cards, and Pram only 4.
Yeah, and this is the absolute best time for Jimmy to play the N. He is taking 2 prizes this turn, so these are the most cards he's ever going to get off of an N for the rest of the game.
Exactly. Not unimportantly is the fact that Pram is going to go down to a 4-card hand, which really limits his options.
Yeah, so 4 cards, and as you can see, Pramawat does have the water attached to that Seismitoad, but he's going to need to find another energy to be able to attack next turn.
This is actually a pretty decent 4-card hand for Pram. He finds 2 double colorless energies and a super scoop up, which can always mean more damage for Golbat and Crobat.
Absolutely. We see Pram promoting the GoldBat, taking some time to think about what's in his hand. He does find that double colorless energy for the Seismitoad.
Now remember that this is actually kind of important that the Vespiquen will likely not get knocked out here. We don't see a laser or any type of potential Golbat activations for Pram here. So that means that the Vespiquen will not be knocked out, which means it's going to be able to knock out an additional Seismitoad here. Super Scoop Up here from Pramawat is heads. Super Scoop Up is going to bring back the Shaman. Remember that it cannot actually use its ability because of Silent Lab, but still, it's not going to be an easy knockout for Jimmy.
And we can see the Vespiquen get knocked out if Pram can find a Crobat. Because Pram can put 3 damage counters on that Vespiquen, going up to 4 damage counters, and then he can deal 50 damage with that Seismitoad.
So now, remember, Pram's pretty much out of Super Scoop Ups by now. He might have 1 remaining, but that is not many. Brings back, I believe, a Crobat line, or maybe 2 Crobats and a Golbat. Pram definitely wants to see another Zubat come down into his bench. At least 1, definitely. But he's almost out of Super Scoop Ups. This is going to be rough for Pram. It actually seems like Jimmy's right back in the lead here.
Yeah, absolutely. I think if Pram just needs to get that Crobat down, he needs to start taking prizes here, and he needs to hope that there's no more double colorless for Jimmy in there.
He did have a Crobat in hand. That Crobat was huge. That actually means the Vespiquen's going to go down. Remember, Crobat is going to deal 30 damage to that Vespiquen, putting it at 40 damage, 50 hit points left, which means a Quaking Punch from Seismitoad is going to knock out that Vespiquen. I did not see that Crobat in Pram's hand.
Yeah, and it looks like there's no double colorless for Jimmy, just the basic fire energy in hand. So we can see the same thing next turn. You know, we did see Pram shovel that Crobat back into his deck. Another Sneaky Bite activation and another Quaking Punch could knock out that Vespiquen, but it looks like Jimmy's going to go ahead and just retreat, protect the Vespiquen. Very great idea, switching into that Shaman EX.
That was enormous for Pram. I had no idea he had that Crobat. That Crobat ended up making all the difference there. That's exactly the Pokemon that Pramawat needed in order to bring himself right back into this game. And now Lysander brings up the Flareon. Flareon is going to get knocked out in 1 hit because of Quaking Punch, and it's going to bring Pram down to 2 prizes remaining.
Yeah, absolutely. And now Jimmy's going to promote that Vespiquen. The Vespiquen does have free retreat, so not a big deal to promote that guy and just see what happens. But with 2 prizes remaining to Jimmy's 3, no double colorless in Jimmy's hand. He's got an uphill battle ahead of him, to say the least.
The streak is definitely on the line here. The streak is in danger of being over. Pramawat is unreal. Pramawat is just unreal here. And now Shaman does start Sky Returning, brings both himself and 2 fire energies back to Jimmy's hand, activates a new Shaman. Shaman will likely not get knocked out here, but still, Jimmy's just on the ropes here.
Oh, there's a laser and a head. That Shaman's going to stay asleep. You see Jimmy shaking his head. I think that's the 3rd laser heads in a row that Pramawat's gotten.
An end now from Mike is going to bring both players down to very low hand sizes. 2 for Pram, 3 for Jimmy. And remember, Jimmy's Shaman is asleep. Jimmy has basically no real aggression going here. And he needs to find a way to get the Shaman into the out of the active position as soon as possible.
Yeah, so that Shaman will go to 60 damage after the poison. And if that is left active, that's going to be the game. We see that Jimmy's hand does not appear to have any outs. It's going to be a big flip.
Big flip for Jimmy. Tails. The Shaman stays asleep. Is this going to be the end of the game? Jimmy needs something, anything.
Looks like he's considering playing a Professor Juniper. Yeah, he just got to do it.
Jimmy draws 7 additional cards here. He needs to draw something, some sort of a way to get himself out of this position. Does he find it? No,
and that's
we see a handshake.
The streak is over.
The streak is over. Jimmy O'Brien extends his hand. Michael Pramawat wins this round and is now 9-1 going into round 11. 4 rounds to go for Pram. He needs 1 more win. Jimmy still needs 2. Both of these players are very live for top 8, but man, was that a match for the ages.
Wow.
Jimmy has finally been defeated. Pramawat is looking as strong as ever, and after his Week 1 Regionals win, he has now taken down the undefeated top-seeded player, and he is in prime position